The snow falling on the streets of New York at the end of Spider-Man No Way Home was not just a change of season, but the cold, harsh reality of a completely erased existence. The entire world has absolutely forgotten who Peter Parker is, wiping away his legacy in a matter of seconds. MJ has forgotten the boys she loved, Ned has forgotten his best friend and his guy in the chair, and the Avengers practically do not know this kid who fought alongside them against Thanos. He is starting from absolute zero, walking into a dingy apartment with nothing but a sewing machine and a heartbroken resolve. This upcoming movie is literally a fresh beginning, stripping away every single advantage he ever had. Marvel is deliberately pushing him into an isolated corner where nobody is coming to save him, creating a vacuum in his life that forces him to rely entirely on his own raw grit and intelligence. We are looking at a story where the safety net is completely gone, leaving us with a hero who has to rediscover his place in a universe that does not even remember he helped save it from total annihilation. The title, Brand New Day, is not just a catchy phrase thrown into a marketing meeting, but a very specific, deeply tragic storyline pulled directly from the comic books that changes everything. In that original comic arc, Peter's entire identity is completely erased from the public consciousness. His most important relationships are brutally reset, and his life is forced to restart from the ground up under the most depressing circumstances imaginable. Marvel is clearly following this exact same direction, stripping away every single piece of advanced technology and billionaire funding he ever had access to. Right now, Peter has absolutely no Stark tech to rely on, no artificial intelligence guiding his suits, no Avengers compound to retreat to, and his emotional support system through Happy Hogan is completely gone. He is left with nothing but a flimsy, homemade suit stitched together in a cramped room, forcing him to evolve back into the true, gritty, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. This is a deliberate deconstruction of the character we have watched grow over the last decade, removing the Iron Man shadow that has followed him for years and forcing him to finally stand completely on his own 2 feet in the dark. You have to ask yourself why Marvel is intentionally breaking their most popular character down to his absolute weakest, most vulnerable position right before the biggest crossover event in cinematic history. It is a brilliant calculated storytelling theory because putting Peter in this miserable state is exactly what will make his eventual comeback in Doomsday resonate so incredibly hard on an emotional level. You have to completely shatter a hero, push them into the dirt, and make the audience genuinely feel their hopelessness before you can rebuild them into a legend who leads the charge. This is the classic, time-tested Marvel formula of tearing the protagonist apart physically and mentally just so their triumphant return feels like an explosive release of tension. By the time Doomsday arrives, Spider-Man will have crawled his way out of the absolute bottom of the barrel, making his presence on that battlefield feel earned rather than just expected. We are going to watch him suffer through the lonely nights of Brand New Day so that when the sky tears open and the multiverse starts collapsing, his decision to step up and fight alongside the greatest heroes will carry the weight of a true survivor. This brings us to what might be the most fascinating and misunderstood piece of this massive cinematic puzzle, which is the upcoming theatrical encore re-release of Avengers Endgame. Almost everyone online is looking at this announcement and instantly dismissing it as nothing more than a desperate corporate cash grab by a studio looking to artificially inflate their box office numbers. But when you look at the grand design of this interconnected roadmap, it becomes obvious that the actual reason for bringing Endgame back to theaters is significantly larger and far more psychological. Marvel is deliberately forcing the audience to sit in the dark and remember exactly what it felt like to watch the universe stand united against an impossible threat, emotionally conditioning us for what is coming. They need to vividly remind the world of the sheer scale of the Avengers assembling, because Doomsday is going to attempt to replicate and then completely shatter that exact same feeling. By putting Endgame back on the massive screen, they are basically hitting the reset button on our collective nostalgia, preparing our minds and hearts for a multiversal war that will make the Battle of Earth look like a minor skirmish. The most crucial element of watching Endgame again right now is experiencing the absolute finality and overwhelming grief of Tony Stark making the ultimate sacrifice to save the universe. Marvel wants us to witness him snapping his fingers, watch the life drain from his eyes, and hear that devastating silence in the theater one more time before they introduce the next catastrophic threat. They are doing this because just a few months after we cry over Tony Stark all over again, Dr. Doom is going to step out of the shadows and change the hierarchy of the entire multiverse. If you look closely at the comic book history between Dr. Doom and Iron Man, you will find a remarkably deep, complex, and intertwined connection that constantly blurs the line between man and machine. Marvel is brilliantly manipulating our lingering attachment to Tony Stark, forcing us to remember the man who gave up everything for a peaceful future, just as a terrifying new god rises to claim that future for himself. This re-release is not just a movie screening, it is an emotional primer designed to make the impending arrival of Dr. Doom feel incredibly personal and deeply traumatic for the audience. Now imagine the absolute psychological shockwave that will hit the theaters if the brilliant, tyrannical Dr. Doom is played by the exact same actor who immortalized Tony Stark for over a decade. Watching Endgame again makes this potential casting twist the most devastating emotional trick Marvel has ever pulled, weaponizing our own love for a fallen hero against us in the most cruel way possible. You are forced to remember this specific face as the ultimate savior of humanity, the man who looked Thanos in the eye and saved reality, only to see that very same face twisted by absolute evil. This is why the Endgame Encore is so critical. Because Marvel is not just trying to cheaply sell nostalgia to the audience. They are actively and aggressively building new nostalgia to violently tear it down. The emotional dissonance of seeing Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, and the rest of the world look at the universe's greatest villain and see the ghost of their greatest friend is a masterclass in cinematic tension. They are setting up a scenario where the heroes are paralyzed by their own grief, unable to strike down the monster in front of them because he wears the face of the man they mourn. All of this emotional manipulation and strategic storytelling bleeds directly into Avengers Doomsday, a massive cinematic event that is actively shaping up to be the Marvel Cinematic Universe's next definitive in-game-level spectacle. We have completely pivoted away from the original plan surrounding Kang the Conqueror. And while the overarching multiverse saga remains firmly in place, the true focus has dangerously shifted entirely onto the shoulders of Dr. Doom. You have to understand that in the vast lore of the comic books, Victor Von Doom is never just a simple villain with a one-dimensional plan for world domination or generic destruction. He is an unparalleled genius, a ruthless scientist whose intellect rivals Reed Richards, a master sorcerer who commands magic just like Doctor Strange, and a sovereign king who rules his nation with an absolute iron fist. He is the ultimate manipulator who bends the wills of gods and monsters alike, eventually ascending to become the undisputed master of the multiverse who dictates the survival of entire timelines. By replacing Kang with a threat of this unimaginable magnitude, Marvel has escalated the stakes to a terrifying degree, giving us an antagonist who genuinely believes his absolute tyranny is the universe's only salvation. The core mechanism of this upcoming multiversal devastation revolves entirely around the terrifying concept of incursions, a cosmic phenomenon where two completely separate universes violently collide into one another. When this catastrophic event occurs, the absolute rule of the cosmos dictates that only one universe can possibly survive the impact, while the other is instantly and permanently erased from existence. It is a terrifying game of cosmic roulette, and Doctor Doom is the only being arrogant and powerful enough to actually take advantage of this unimaginable chaos for his own grand design. Instead of trying to prevent the universes from destroying each other like a traditional hero would, Doom will actively step into the collapsing void, manipulating the dying realities to forge something entirely new under his total command. He thrives in the exact moments where gods fall and realities crumble, positioning himself not as a destroyer, but as the twisted savior of a dying multiverse who demands absolute worship in exchange for survival. This is the existential dread that will drive the plot of Doomsday, forcing our fractured and grieving heroes to navigate a collapsing reality where the very fabric of existence is actively tearing itself apart around them. Because the threat of multiversal collapse is so astronomically huge, the roster of heroes required to stand against Doctor Doom will make the final battle of Endgame look incredibly small by comparison. We are looking at a cinematic event that will forcefully pull almost every single active hero across multiple fragmented realities into one completely unified, desperate resistance against total annihilation. You are going to see Spider-Man swinging alongside the newly introduced Fantastic Four, fighting shoulder to shoulder with legendary legacy characters from the X-Men universe, while the remaining Avengers and the armies of Wakanda hold the line. Throw in the reality-bending magic of Doctor Strange and the cosmic fury of Thor, and you have a cinematic convergence of iconic characters that transcends anything we have ever witnessed on a movie screen. Marvel is building towards a moment where every single isolated storyline, every forgotten universe, and every fractured timeline crashes into a single narrative choke point in a desperate bid to stop Doom from rewriting creation. The sheer logistical and emotional scale of uniting these completely different factions under one banner is exactly why the universe needs to be pushed to the absolute brink of destruction to make their alliance believable. In the middle of all this massive cosmic chaos, Spider-Man's specific role becomes arguably the most fascinating and crucial theory of the entire upcoming saga because of his current isolated status. Right now, literally nobody in the entire universe knows who Peter Parker is, which practically means he is completely off the grid and not an official member of any recognized superhero team or organization. This profound isolation makes him an absolute wildcard in a multiversal war, a solitary operative who can move through the shadows and influence events without being tracked or anticipated by Doom's overwhelming intellect. While Doctor Strange theoretically understands the complex mechanics of the multiverse from an academic and magical standpoint, Spider-Man is one of the only heroes who has actually lived through and survived a catastrophic multiversal collapse. His direct, traumatic experience in dealing with fractured realities and displaced variants makes him uniquely qualified to navigate the absolute insanity that Doctor Doom is about to unleash upon the colliding universes. Peter is no longer just a kid from Queens trying to stop local bank robbers. He is a seasoned survivor of multiversal warfare whose street-level anonymity might just be the exact tactical advantage the universe desperately needs. The lingering mystery of Doctor Strange's memory-wiping spell presents another massive hidden detail that could drastically alter the course of the upcoming battle against the Master of the Multiverse. We know that the spell successfully erased Peter Parker from the minds of everyone on Earth. But it remains a heavily debated mystery whether that magical effect extends to vastly superior beings from entirely different universes. If Doctor Doom originates from a reality outside the immediate influence of that specific spell, there is a terrifying possibility that he might actually know exactly who Spider-Man is beneath the mask. This creates a deeply unsettling dynamic where the villain holds a psychological advantage over a hero who believes his greatest secret is completely safe from the rest of the fractured cosmos. Furthermore, this opens up the tragic theory that Peter Parker might initially be manipulated into trusting Doctor Doom, entirely because he looks exactly like the man who sacrificed everything to save him. Imagine the sheer heartbreak of an isolated, lonely Peter Parker seeing that familiar face, letting his guard down in a desperate search for his old mentor, only to slowly realize he is looking into the eyes of a monster. The hidden parallels running deeply between the events of Endgame and the impending dread of Doomsday are absolutely everywhere if you know exactly where to look for them. Think about the stark contrast between Iron Man, a deeply flawed man who ultimately sacrificed his own life to save reality, and Doctor Doom, a man who will happily sacrifice all of reality just to attain absolute power. Consider how Steve Rogers finally learned to let go of the fight and choose a quiet future for himself, while Doom represents a suffocating tyranny that aggressively seeks to control the entire future of everything. Even comparing the villains reveals a fascinating evolution in philosophy, where Thanos genuinely believed he was saving the universe by violently forcing it into a twisted, random balance, whereas Doom demands nothing short of absolute, manufactured perfection under his singular vision. In Endgame, we watched the Avengers organically unite out of love and desperation to reverse a tragedy. But in Doomsday, the entire multiverse will be violently forced to unite just to prevent total erasure. The portals that opened to bring heroes to a single battlefield will be replaced by entire universes bleeding into one another in a chaotic, multiversal war that threatens everything. As this multiversal war escalates, there is a very strong theory that Doctor Strange, despite his incredible magical prowess and profound understanding of mystical threats, will fundamentally fail to stop Doctor Doom on his own. Strange is incredibly powerful, but his arrogance and reliance on control will inevitably clash with a villain whose mastery over both supreme magic and advanced science makes him completely unpredictable and virtually unstoppable. When the Sorcerer Supreme inevitably falls or finds himself completely outmatched by Doom's reality-bending machinations, the scattered and broken remnants of the universe will be violently forced to realize they cannot fight this battle in isolated pockets. This catastrophic failure is the exact catalyst required to force the Avengers to officially assemble once again, pulling heroes out of retirement, isolation, and alternate dimensions to form a desperately needed resistance. It is in this exact moment of overwhelming despair that the universe will remember the lessons of the Endgame era, realizing that the only way to defeat a god who controls reality is to stand completely united against him. The failure of the magical community will be the definitive spark that reignites the dormant spirit of the Earth's mightiest heroes just when all hope seems entirely lost. Running parallel to the massive Avengers storyline is the deeply personal and historically complicated relationship between Doctor Doom and the newly arriving Fantastic Four, specifically his intense burning hatred for Reed Richards. In the comic books, Doom's absolute core motivation and most defining character trait is his obsessive, deeply rooted rivalry with Reed, viewing him as the only intellectual equal worthy of his absolute destruction. This personal vendetta means that while Doomsday will heavily feature the Avengers and Spider-Man trying to save the universe, the true emotional conflict and the key to unraveling Doom's master plan might actually belong to the Fantastic Four. As Doom systematically rips realities apart to prove his ultimate superiority, he is effectively merging the fragmented pieces of the dying multiverse into a singular, horrifying amalgamation over which he can rule as an undisputed God King. This terrifying process of smashing universes together and stitching them into a patchwork planet is the exact, deliberate setup required to lead the Marvel Cinematic Universe directly into the monumental events of Secret Wars. The Avengers are fighting to save their home, but Reed Richards is fighting a deeply personal war against a ghost from his past who has ascended to multiversal godhood. When you finally step back and look at the entire cinematic board, Marvel's secret, sprawling roadmap reveals itself as a perfectly constructed chain reaction of grief, nostalgia, and multiversal warfare. It completely begins by resetting Spider-Man in Brand New Day, isolating him to build his resilience, then strategically screening the Endgame Encore to emotionally devastate the audience and remind us of Tony Stark's ultimate sacrifice. This beautifully transitions right into Doomsday, where Dr. Doom weaponizes that exact familiar face to shatter our heroes, forcing a massive, unprecedented assembly of the multiverse that inevitably catapults everything straight into the chaos of Secret Wars. Through all this pain and destruction, Spider-Man will slowly climb from the absolute lowest point of his life to finally embrace his true destiny, officially starting his journey to become the definitive leader of the next generation of Avengers. Thank you all so much for sticking with me through this massive breakdown. I really hope this theory blew your mind as much as it did mine while putting it together. Please remember to drop a like, share this with your friends, hit that subscribe button, and definitely let me know your craziest theories in the comment section below. This is host Liam Harrison from MovieCast, thanking you for staying connected throughout the video.